We are workers who want to own our work. We are owners who want to own their work. We are workers who want to be owned. Socialism, brother, I don't want a bunch of freeloaders living off of my hard work. We want to give your tax money back to you. No! We want to give your tax money to corporations. Oh my God, stop. We want to abolish private capital and the profit motive, which determines what things get made instead of what things need to be made. But how would you get any outside investors to invest in your business if there's no profit motive? You're not understanding that there is no need for outside investors if we are abolishing private capital. There's no need for private ownership. Resources are publicly owned. Workplaces are democratically run. The communities themselves are in control of the resources that the community uses. Communities decide what gets made. Communities decide what happens to their community. Not multi-billionaires who have never stepped foot into the community and are not personally affected by the decisions they make that affect that community. But how do people make money? People make more money. Workers own more of their labor. They own more of the fruits of their labor. They own the value of what their labor has produced. It's not being siphoned off and leached from corporate executives who don't even live in the community. But everything takes capital. Yes, it's just who owns that capital, the public or private owners. But if you couldn't profit off of something, then why would you want to work? Why would you want to produce anything? Yes, exactly. Why do we work? Why do we produce all these things when we don't enjoy the surplus value? We don't get the profits. It goes to people that don't work. Well, they took the risk. They fronted the capital to make the business even possible. You're just describing capitalism as if it's commerce, as if it's the only way an economy can be run. Why is it that liberals always say this? How is it that they fail to realize they are projecting the failures of capitalism, the only global economic system for the past 250 years, onto another fledgling system that has never been actually fully realized because of those very same capitalist powers that have interceded on their own behalf to destroy socialist developments? This is not a conspiracy. This actually happened. It is the history of the 20th century alone. It's why Henry Kissinger dropped more bombs on Cambodia than in all Allied bombings in the Pacific theater of World War II. It's why Henry Kissinger called socialist countries that were undergoing democratic reform a virus which must be contained. It's why the domino theory was a major concern by U.S. planners throughout the Cold War. It's what U.S. policymakers considered the threat of a good example: democracy succeeding in one country and having a domino effect and spreading to other countries. This had to be stopped at all costs, and it was. It's why America instigated the worst war crime since World War II in the Vietnam War. It's why Truman bombed North Korea, killing 20% of the population. It's why Dwight D. Eisenhower invaded Guatemala in 1954. It's why U.S. diplomat George Kennan, as late as 1941, was calling Hitler tolerable and viewed him as a moderate who was a bulwark against socialism and communism developing in the Eastern Bloc. It's why we have today a nearly $1 trillion defense budget. It's why the U.S., as late as 2020, attempted to coup the Venezuelan government. It's why Woodrow Wilson invaded Haiti and occupied the country for 2 decades. That was just one of our invasions of Haiti. There have been several. How do liberals not factor into their analysis the devastating consequences of Western imperialism, neocolonialism, the exploitative nature of the global finance capital system, the IMF, the World Bank, the coup d'etats, the sanctions, the blockades, the embargoes, the illegal invasions, the labor exploitation, the resource extraction? How do they completely discard the centuries of forcible dispossession of resources from indigenous people people? How do they shrug off the power differentials, the material conditions of people by which society organizes itself into a class-based structure? Capitalism kills 20 million a year, and those are preventable deaths because these are poor people and it's not profitable to save them. So let's use your logic. If people invest in something, they should see a return on their investment. The people that incurred the risk and cost and fronted the money should, when there is a profit, that profit should return to them. That makes sense, right? If that's true, then where is the return on the very public investment of the bank bailouts in the 2008 housing crash? Where is the return on the public investment of the internet, of GPS, of software, of microelectronics, of the decades and decades long subsidy of the high-tech economy and industry? Where is our investment? We paid for all these things, and now they are privatized, handed over to private corporations, and sold back to us. This is fundamentally an abomination of supposedly free market capitalism. This is the principle of actually existing capitalism. Profits are privatized, cost and risk are socialized. The public always pays the cost, and the profits always go to the wealthy bankers and corporate execs. It's a hypocrisy on a national, state, world level, and yet it is the most ardent defenders of capitalism that are the most victimized by capitalism. This is the most common reactionary argument, time and time again. They think human history is over, and there's no point in arguing for a freer, more democratic society, when history has only demonstrated the exact opposite. So, for instance, in the 1600s, you had peasants defending their monarchs because they thought that a democracy, a government ruled by the people, was impossible. So let's just continue with our subjugation, let's continue with slavery, let's continue with fascist violence and imperialism. But guess what? In the 1700s, they abolished the monarchy. In the 1800s, people like this would be defending slavery, saying that people that were trying to abolish slavery were just fools, that could never happen. Slave societies were always prevalent in human history, so therefore there's no point in trying to change it. It's the common might makes right argument. We're just going to side with whoever's in power and just not look into it. We're just going to assume whatever entity is in power has a right to be there and not question it. Women trying to have the right to vote, please. Black people wanting their freedom? Oh my God. This reactionary argument is not new, and it's always been defeated, and you just have to look at history to see that. If everyone thought like this, there would be no social change. There would be no social movements, there would be no progress. In every generation of humans, there's always reactionary people that will defend the status quo. Brother, I hate to rain on your parade, but we already have evidence that socialism works. Socialism is here, and we see it every day. It's just that it's socialism for the rich. See, what you call capitalism is actually a socialized government insurance policy for multinational corporations paid for by none other than you. You keep them in business and you foot the bill. But wait, state funding keeps private industry in business? Yes, it does. What about the free market? Yes, the free market is for the poor. The free market is for you. It's not for the 1%. Government helping corporations? Capitalism. Government helps the public? That's socialism. This person's absolutely correct. If we didn't have capitalist owners and bosses and managers forcing us to go to work in exchange for basic human rights like food and housing, why would we go to work? You're gonna tell me if workers owned their work and the work that they did affected the communities that they lived in, that they would still want to produce something quality? If I can't make my rich boss richer, then I don't want to work. I don't want to do anything. I need to know that he can afford his third home in Cabo and the maintenance cost on his private jet. I need to know that he can afford his son's tuition at Harvard. I can only sleep if I know that he's got that seed funding secured for his son's venture capital startup when he graduates. If the value and the wealth that I create from my labor isn't being taken away by my boss, how am I going to take my kids to Disneyland? You're going to tell me that all the value that I create from my labor is going to come back to me? I don't know. That sounds like I'd be really poor. I don't get how socialism works. If everyone's in control, how are decisions even being made? Well, how are decisions made now? Well, we elect representatives who then enact policy. Yes, we delegate. What you're describing is an actual democracy. A majority votes and a majority rules. Yes, we have local representatives who enact local policies and state representatives who enact national policy. Yes, the only difference is that in capitalism, those local and state representatives are handpicked and vetted by multi-billion-dollar corporations. These multi-billion-dollar corporations are owned by a class of people who live extravagantly different lives than the rest of the public. They might as well be living on a different planet. Right. Socialism just means we would have representatives that represent the actual public, the 99%, and would enact policies that benefit the 99% and not the 1%. Okay. Let's give a concrete example. Let's say that a massive privately owned corporation like Shell wants to come into your city and build a fracked gas plant in the middle of a poor neighborhood. In order for that to happen, the corporation must get approved legally by a city council. Obviously, the people affected in the community would not want that power plant to be built because of all sorts of health reasons and concerns. For the moment, let's just put aside the contradiction that there is a privately owned public utility company in a socialist society. We can confidently assume that city council members would vote no to the building of this fracked gas plant because they are representing their community and not corporations. Yeah? Well, in capitalism, those same city council members are actually representatives of corporations. They represent wealth and power. And in some cases, these same city council members are also on the board of directors for these corporations. Or they've received sizable donations from these corporations, which got them elected in the first place. How do you think that they are going to vote when their constituents, large corporations, are trying to get something done? This is the inherent corruption of capitalism. State actors and private actors are hand in hand. Public servants do not serve the public. This is the problem. This is what needs to change. This actually really happened in New Orleans in 2018. Overwhelming public opposition, the New Orleans City Council still approved construction of the gas plant, to the detriment of a Black and Vietnamese community. This is absolutely hilarious to me. People are so thick. People are so dense. This person is describing capitalism and then blaming a system that they do not live in. No one benefits more from capitalism than the three entities that this person just listed. Socialism very bad. We've got the receipts. Look, here's one of the wealthiest bankers, CEO of Chase Manhattan, Jamie Dimon, worth $1.6 billion. Here's CEO hedge fund manager, Bill Ackman, worth $3.4 billion. There's another CEO, Ray Dalio, worth $19 billion. And who can forget everyone's favorite CEO of the largest corporation in the world, Jeff Bezos, worth $120 billion. Here's a list of some of the wealthiest politicians, both Republican and Democrat, worth billions of dollars. It goes on and on and on. When are people gonna wake the fuck up? You do not live in socialism. You live in capitalism. Socialism is literally trying to take away the power and the wealth from these hoarders. When capitalism breaks down catastrophically like it is now, and much like it did in the Great Depression, the victims of capitalism always seek alternative solutions. The political establishment is no longer viable or sustainable. This gives rise to two ideologies, socialism and fascism. Fascists favor capitalism. Fascists favor big business and private industry. They wish to preserve the political economy of capitalism, more than likely because it is an easier way for them to come to power. They understand that in order for capitalism to work, it needs massive government aid and state intervention. So they entreat the captains of industry to support their government takeover by telling them that their capital is not threatened. Capitalists might not like fascists, but they will certainly support them because they definitely don't like socialists. Socialists are the enemies of capitalists. Socialists want to redistribute their wealth. If there is to be a government, then socialists want that government to enact policies that benefit the working class, regular working class people, the general public, and not the richest 1% of the population. This means reappropriating land and resources. It means agrarian reform. Socialists have a harder hill to climb because we must overcome the current political economy rather than acquiesce to it. We are challenging state power and the corporate military industrial complex that hoards all of our money. Socialism at its core, fundamentally, principally speaking, means workers control production. That's it. If a government behaves in a way where it enacts policies that benefit the working class, the general public, then it is said to be socialist. But again, that is not the principle of socialism. That is just socialism in the context of nation states.
Nixon ordered Cambodian genocide. Clinton sent cruise missiles to Sudan, people died. Obama, you gave the orders to do drone strikes. Reagan invaded Nicaragua in '85.